Once we discover we're both autistic and ADHD, it feels like we've unlocked the key to everything. But then comes the real question. How do we actually use this key? I'm Adria Sophia Melikar, an AuDHD coach who's walked this path myself. I've spent over a decade helping hundreds who don't fit the mold to find their own way forward. On AuDHD Sparks, we're reimagining what's possible when we stop forcing ourselves to be who we're not and start doing life differently in ways that leave us feeling resourced and alive. All right, hello, welcome to AuDHD Sparks. I am Adria Sophia Melikar, your host, and today we are talking about rest. You know that thing that you do to make sure that you don't hit burnout or when you need to come back from it? That is what we're talking about, and we're busting the laziness myth today. And this episode really could have also been titled Permission for Unproductive Recovery, or Laziness Doesn't Exist after Devon Price's book, or Video Games Are Healing. Could have easily had all of those titles. And I felt like I had to do this episode after the last couple episodes where I was talking about how to know when we hit that burnout tipping point and how to pull ourselves back from the edge. Because this might be one of the biggest barriers to burnout recovery, like not allowing ourselves to truly rest, not understanding what true rest even looks like, being a little bit confused and like, what do I even need to give myself? What am I allowed to give myself? Or maybe even getting confused between what phase of recovery we're in and thinking, having a healthy lifestyle, eating healthy food, working out regularly is what we need for recovery, when really that might be what we need once we've done enough baseline rest to get out of the danger zone. And so we're going to explore this today. So remember when in one of the first episodes of this podcast, I said that rest looks different for us AuDHDers, and that the self-development and self-improvement industry would have us believe that we need to just lie down and be still, but that what we need is probably some type of stimulation to go with that, and being understimulated, aka just lying down and being still, likely isn't that restful for us, right? Remember when I talked about that? Well, here's where things get nuanced, because that's like regular rest. That's like every weekend when you need to unwind, you need to recharge after the work week and before going into the next one. And that's where we have this big open swath of time, and forcing yourself to not do anything can feel painful. But in the last couple episodes, we've been talking about a different kind of rest, a different kind of time where you've hit that tipping point, things are dire, you need to pull yourself back. And in those cases, I am kind of talking about lying down and not doing much of anything, targeted rest. So just wanted to make that distinction as we go in and explore this today, in case you're like, wait, Adria, like you're so contradictory. Well, life is too. And our neurotype is also. So we explore the nuances of things here. Okay. So yeah, for the rest of us, rest. Okay, for us, for those of us who are AuDHD, rest can mean different things. So if we are deep in burnout and we're clawing our way out, or if we're at that tipping point of no return, or if we've hit like major overwhelm and our brain and our nervous system have just kind of shut down, then rest can mean stopping everything and being mindless on the couch, alternating between napping and binge watching a comfort show, the one where you've seen it before, and when you watch it, it makes you feel cozy and safe, and you know all the characters, and it feels like this warm hug. Like, seriously. Or it can mean playing video games, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit as well. And yeah, so while we're at it, let's debunk some other things that so many of us have ingrained in us about rest without even realizing we think this, right? This is where like that internalized ableism comes in, and where that societal conditioning comes in, because it's like we don't know we think these things until we listen to a podcast like this and then explore it, and they're like, oh shit. Like that. Yep. That's true. That's how I've been acting. And so that's why it's good to kind of expose ourselves to things like this and be like, oh, okay. I wouldn't know unless someone mentioned it and I saw myself in it. So I know a lot of us autistic folks have read Unmasking Autism by Devon Price. I feel like it's a little bit of like the like the book that you like that you initiate yourself with, or then you hand to a family member. But have you also checked out his earlier book, Laziness Doesn't Exist? So there's a really revolutionary yet deceivingly simple concept inside that I think helps us kind of lean into rest. And that's that this thing we call laziness isn't actually a thing. That every time someone is what we perceive as lazy, there's actually a reason behind it. So either they are silently struggling, like is the case with neurodivergent people and those with invisible disabilities, or maybe whatever it is that they're doing doesn't just have that same priority to them as it does to us. Like it's just not that important to them and they're choosing not to do it. And so that's not lazy, that's just different priorities. And so when you think about it, when we perceive something or someone as lazy, we're making this judgment call from our own perspective, but we don't know what's going on with that person. Price talks about homeless people as an example. So like we've got this societal perspective that says like get a job, or like labels people who are unhoused as lazy. But Price argues it's a lot of work to be homeless, like finding a place to sleep each night, spending the whole day on a street corner asking for money, going to get water each day. Like, you don't have plumbing. Like, probably going to the bathroom is hard. Like, where do I go? From van life, I've experienced a tiny little slice of this. Like, there are things that those of us with housing take for granted, like knowing where you're sleeping every night. When you're out in the van, a lot of bandwidth and discussion with your van mates goes towards where you're sleeping that night, like especially when you're in a city, because nobody wants you parking anywhere we're in the city. They're like, don't park here overnight. So you're trying to find a spot that's level so you can sleep well, because you're not like at this weird tilt where you're like falling off the bed, and it's somewhat quiet. And that also is somewhere that's acceptable and enough away from being in people's face. And so you spend a chunk of each day thinking about where you're sleeping and figuring out this complicated puzzle. And if you're AuDHD, man, that can be really exhausting. And so I can't even imagine the amount of work and labor and energy that goes into not having a home, not having a roof over your head regularly. And what rest also isn't. So rest is also not a reward for productivity. Like once I do XYZ, then I get to rest, right? I think that is a trap that I easily fall into. And sometimes it can be helpful. Like it can let me just kind of push through these last few tasks I need to do with like that reward of lying on the couch afterwards, that allure. It kind of helped me rally and step forward to like complete things. But when we truly need rest, like when we are deep in burnout or like major overwhelm or pulling ourselves back from that edge, we need to be able to let go of that, I need to be productive first in order to earn it, and just say, I need rest, and then table everything else. Like at that point, it is no longer a choice. It may be the only way that you're going to break the cycle and avoid hopping back on the burnout merry-go-round. And that's where that laziness myth comes back in, because sometimes what looks like laziness to others isn't actually a choice. And until our society or the people around us read Price's book, we need to be okay with giving ourselves what we need, regardless of how others look at us. I mean, that's like frustrating. And I bet we can have conversations with the people closest to us and try to kind of shepherd them through these understandings as we're going through them as well, right? There can be different relationships that are closer to us that feel safer with this, but it is kind of the truth that sadly, we can't wait for other people to see things the way we do when we have this awakening of like, hey, wait, laziness is a myth. We need to be able to give it to ourselves. And rest might look lazy to people who have never been truly exhausted. Think about it that way too, right? Like there's this difference between what my body needs and what my partner's body needs. And we live in the same space, which means I'm resting in the space that he's at. We both work from home. We're seeing each other all the time. And we're both neurodivergent, but I have chronic conditions that require more rest. And he's more on that external hyperactive side of ADHD, which means he needs to be out in the world doing things to get recharged. He needs to be just always doing. Where my busyness is kind of internal and I need to lie down while my brain is stimulated. So taking care of himself looks productive and active and what society says we should be, right? Like there's this element that like he looks not lazy, right? Where taking care of myself looks lazy, yet both of them are taking care of ourselves. And even if I didn't know all these things about myself, my partner, and wasn't able to analyze the situation like I just have, if I pay attention to my body and when my nervous system is shutting down or going haywire and when I naturally need to do what I naturally am kind of like driven towards, I would know, okay, my baseline does seem to mean like needing more couch time at home, even if I didn't know why. So yet at the same time, like this difference does make it hard for me. Like I keep measuring myself against him and I know that he is doing that too. I've spent most of my life measuring myself against others, knowing that my natural way wasn't okay, right? Like I feel like we get that ingrained really easy early on as autistic people, as neurodivergent folks. And so kind of we start to look to others, especially, I think especially socialized female too, right? Because there's that extra layer where we're kind of expected to like get all the social nuances and navigate and adjust accordingly and not be too much or not like step on anyone else's toes or like so there's this like recognition of like, okay, I need to look to others to see what's acceptable because the way I would naturally do this isn't. And since it's not natural, I need to see what other people are doing. Right. And so that's very much like ingrained in me. And I think probably a lot of us. And so just like, if I think back to as a kid looking to my mom for like, okay, what does this look like? What is laziness okay? Right. And my mom was like my partner where she never sat still. She always needs to be doing. She has those similar needs where that recharges her. And so I saw that as like, okay, that's what's okay. Like if I'm resting more than her, if I'm lying down more than her, if I'm still more than her, if I'm not physically actively doing as much as she is, then I must be lazy. And so I kind of use that as a barometer, right? And whoever's around me kind of ends up through my life has become that barometer of like, okay, if they rest, I'm allowed to rest. Okay, I must be allowed to rest. And I know I'm not alone in this. And it's such a hard habit to break, right? Like this is how that internalized ableism is built and how it becomes just such a part of us that we don't even realize it. The hardest part is myself. The guilt, the shame that says that if people see me lying down day after day, they'll think that I'm not contributing, that I'm entitled, that I'm lazy, and that is the worst thing. It's kind of wild, right? If I was on my own, if I was living alone and no one ever had to see me rest, I could feel more peace following my own pace and giving myself the breaks and the downtime I need. And that does happen when my partner's away and I kind of have the lay of the land and the whole house and I'm just like following my rhythms and it feels so good, right? There's no one to see if I'm just lounging around and but I also love having a partner and having partnership and living in a shared space and so it's this nuance we're navigating. Since I work from home, so does my partner. Like I said, my mom is retired and also lives with us. I'm always in contrast to them. So for example, you've heard me talk over it feels like the last 4 episodes or something, like about being sick and recovering from this cold, this respiratory infection that was stealing my voice. That I technically had it for 2 weeks, but then it lingered. It dragged into a month, when I was recovering, and now it's over a month and I'm still getting my lung capacity back. And in the beginning of my recovery, when I'd kind of gotten through the worst and it was starting to linger, I thought I was resting so much. I was like, I'm doing such a good job trying to recover. Like, why am I not getting better? And to my husband's eyes, my level of rest was extreme. Like, he would probably never be, lying on the couch the amount I was. And he was like, oh my gosh, did I marry a slug? And that's his perspective, right? That's through his eyes. But then when I input what I was doing into AI and was like trying to figure out like why I wasn't getting better, Claude, our boyfriend Claude, Claude just like laid it down for me, like just called me out, and said, you have not really been resting. You need to actually have a full day with nothing planned, no just this one task, no nothing, just rest. And so what seemed like a ton of rest to me in comparison to my partner was actually not adequate for what I needed. So honoring your spoons isn't weakness, it's actually wisdom. Okay, so what recovery activity works for you that others might call lazy? Okay, so the first thing that came to mind was cozy video games. It's such a I have a complicated relationship with this, I think, and maybe a lot of other people do too. When I was a kid, I used to play video games. I was a kid in the 80s and 90s. And so I started out with regular Nintendo and then graduated to Super Nintendo when it came out. And I also had a Game Boy. And I remember having that Game Boy with me during a trip to Disneyland and playing it like at the table while we waited for our lunch. And probably I was asked to put it away. I don't really remember, but the memory stuck with me, that portable little bit of peace, regulation. Like little did I know that these things were actually regulating me. And as I grew up as a kid, reading the fantasy books that I would read in the car while we were on family road trips, where we would drive from Nevada all the way up to central Canada. And so it would take 3 or even 4 days that we were in the car together. And so I would read books like a lot of that time. And that was another regulation, way of regulating while having stimulation, right? I think that's the key there, regulating, but also stimulating, that I had, but that one had less stigma. And I became an adult and I adopted the grown-up stance that video games are lazy. Like, who has time for that anyways when we have an adult life and we have jobs and we have, a house to run and we have, all of these things. Like, who has time for that? And so it felt a bit weird and like almost taboo when an AuDHD friend who's a spoonie, who's navigating disability and chronic illness, suggested that I take up cozy games during my burnout recovery. It was like we were in this like back alley with some secret like counterculture, whispered like remedy being whispered to me. Like at the time I had been kind of struggling with this burnout recovery where I would just like get in my head, like, as I was lying down trying to rest, I would get in my head and I would just start to plan different things or think through stuff or worry about the future or kind of spiral a bit. And so turning off my brain was hard. And she suggested playing cozy games as a way to shut the brain off, but still have stimulation because it had been really helpful for her. And I was someone at the time who had never even played games on my phone because I had that in my brain that I'm an adult. I know a lot of adults play games on their phone, so I'm not sure why I had that, but I did. And, adults don't do this. Who has time for this kind of thing, right? And so she kind of nudged me towards starting off with playing Apple Arcade games on my phone. And I started doing that and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really helpful for being able to unplug from thinking about things and just be in the moment of it, and have a little stimulation and let myself just rest. And so I started doing that. And then eventually when it hurt my hands and my wrist is a little bit sensitive to things, I got myself a handheld Nintendo Switch. I kind of graduated up to an official game console. And then I got ergonomic grips for it. So it kind of like my body could still feel good while I was doing this. And then this way I can lay down and play, resting my body, but stimulating my brain without getting, like, I have so many projects. I have so many house projects for this house and so many projects for the yard and so many things to think about and design. Obviously, I also have a business and this podcast, and there's so many things I'm creating all the time that I'm envisioning and I'm planning out and mapping out, that those are the things I would naturally go to when I'm laying down and trying to rest, but they're not actually always the restful thing. Or maybe ever. Sometimes the restful thing, if it's like creative and stuff. But when I truly, truly, really, need that rest, they take energy. And so they're probably what I need a break from. So here's our reframe. Video games are not avoidance. They are regulation and rest. So how do you honor needing both stimulation and rest at the same time? So you find the right level of stimulation. Like, that's the distinction I think we've made here is it's like, what is the right level, right? Like, have you hit a wall and your body is telling you that you just need to stop? Or is this just another regular weekend or a midday break between activities and you just need to like have a moment of rest and unplug? If it's the latter, then maybe your weekends or your off time rest includes special interests and enough structure to feel grounded and not adrift, like one activity planned for the weekend or something like that. And also, what I want to focus more on this episode is that first option, that option that might look like laziness. So my answer for when you need to honor both rest and stimulation, and it's that time you've hit a wall or are burnt out, is a couple of things. So these are going to be my two go-to things. There are more things than this, but these feel like a good starting point. So the first one I mentioned before, comfort shows. So some of my go-tos are The Mindy Project, Jane the Virgin, The Good Place. Those are ones that I have watched multiple times. I kind of usually end up waiting a few years or something, and then I've forgotten some of it. And then, I cycle back to it. Most recently, I watched the whole series of Once Upon a Time beginning to end. I had watched a couple of seasons back in the day when it first came out, but I was like, wow, I wonder what all the fairy tale characters are going to end up doing. So that became a recovery show that I was watching when I was sick this last time. And I started watching it also during lunch breaks between client blocks. So I will have a morning block and an afternoon block, especially in the busy season. And it helped me to kind of completely turn off my brain during that middle point, where maybe I would have decided that I was going to map out a podcast episode or do X, Y, Z. But I really had that hour lunch break to decompress. So I had the mental capacity to come back and be with clients again in the afternoon. So it became part of my process in my lunch break that I would watch like part of an episode. And like my partner who I already mentioned works from home, he recently had like that same lunch break time free and like was like, hey, you usually watch a show. Why don't we watch something together during that hour? And I was like, no, because like I explained that it wasn't actually about watching TV. It was like this specific ritual of watching that show in that way that kind of gave me what I needed. It was like the regulation formula that I've been using, and so, so I was like, no, that's not going to give me what I need. I know it's not. I can just feel it if I like visualize. I'm like, nope. Yeah, and so yeah. When I mentioned that I watched Once Upon a Time while I was sick this past cold, I kind of like alternate watching that between playing video games on days without clients, because like that could actually, like, I need that switch in stimulation between things, sometimes like all of one thing, it can be understimulating for me. And now that I've finished that show, I'm starting to watch The Librarians as my go-to kind of comfort show that is in between my client sessions and that is on those off days when I need to like be in recovery mode. And it's my first time seeing it, but it's got that same feel, and pretty quickly it became a comfort show for me. And I can see adding it to my rotation, where there's always a comfort show to pull from and enough time passes that I can kind of cycle through things I've forgotten details, so it's still somewhat stimulating, but also cozy and familiar. And so this is where that right level of stimulation comes in. If you've ever seen any of these shows I've mentioned, you'll notice kind of like a similar vibe. They all have a certain lightness to them. Like they also mostly have what I think of as a Scooby gang. I think I got that term from Buffy. That core group of kind of familiar people, where it feels like family and comfortable. And so all of those things feel soothing and comforting for me, and my nervous system mostly doesn't get activated with these shows. And so they've become like my cozy shows. They fit the bill. Okay, so right level of stimulation. I will talk about that in just a moment. Okay, so for video games, I would say that when we're talking real, true recovery, the key is that it's a cozy game. So what's a cozy game? It's a game that doesn't hit your nervous system hard. You know, like you're like playing a game where you're running around and there's a time clock and you have lives that you might, you know, get to the end and be game over, or you're like shooting people and they're popping out at you. Like that might not be cozy. That might stimulate your nervous system. So a cozy game brings the right level of stimulation you need, but also lets your nervous system rest. So if there's a game and it's not one of those shoot 'em up or time clock or game over games, but it's frustrating, like a really hard puzzle game, or it's stressful, have to perform really difficult tasks and there's no like hints or support. Like it may not be the type of restful that you need for recovery. Like only you can tell that, right? But I'm talking like games like Cozy Grove, like games where you tend to garden, where you collect things, where you do like really small, low pressure missions, that kind of stuff. And it's like Animal Crossing. So in my 20s, I remember, since I was a Mario kid from my childhood games, I remember kind of poo-pooing adults who played Animal Crossing. And now here I am playing cozy games myself. I didn't even have a background of playing these types of games. Like I never even played Zelda as a kid. I was always like the really action games. And maybe that's what like the ADHD side of me, the stimulation I needed at the time, like being able to decompress without masking, being able to kind of stimulate myself. Maybe that's what I needed then. And so it's such a contrast to like the games I play now. And so depending on the game, like it's how much or how little stimulation I need for myself. So I mentioned I've got some chronic conditions. That means lots of horizontal time is key. So if I'm in the space where I can kind of barely function, I need to zone out and have just enough stimulation that I'm able to stay lying down, then I might do something like Dwarf Romantic, which has no storyline, but instead is kind of placing blocks one after another to create a countryside scene. And there's like a rhythm to it. It's really pretty, picturesque. There's no wrong answers. There's a certain pattern to which blocks I might put where that my brain can start to recognize and do on autopilot. Like it's at whatever pace I want it to be at. And it's actually quite soothing for me. Dwarf Romantic. Okay. Or if I need a bit more stimulation and something that's kind of like the right level of complex to keep me engaged, then I might do something like Stardew Island that has like a major, like so many pieces to it. Especially when I can look up hints online that keep me from getting stuck and frustrated, because then nervous system activation, right? Moonstone Island is one I found recently that I found to be quite AuDHD friendly for a cozy game. Like it's complex enough in its stimulation. It's structured, which can be really helpful, but then you can choose what you focus on as well. So it's not like activating demand avoidance. Like that's not what I like to do. You know, there's options. And there's lots of executive function accommodations. Like there's a really clear written out quest log you can use. They give you sprinklers so that you don't have to go in day after day and water your stuff and always come back to your home. You have a tent you can carry with you so that you can place it on whatever island you're on and sleep there and don't have to return home. You can keep exploring. There's nothing you have to remember and keep in your working memory, which is a problem that I have with a lot of games. Is like they're supposed to be cozy, but there's some executive function where you're supposed to remember, like, you know, hold on to the memory of what you were doing or where you're supposed to go, or like what the what the next step is. And I will forget. Like if I start moving in a direction, it will be lost. So So yeah, those kinds of things are really helpful. Recently, I've been replaying Wildflowers, which is a super cute, fun game that's witchy and super inclusive, representation, story-driven, really cozy community. It's just kind of feels really nice. Another couple great, more witchy games are Spiritfarer and Witchwood. Those were really, really fun to play. Maybe I'll cycle back through them at some point as well when I'm kind of had enough space to kind of forget. So they're like stimulating again. And then if I need more stimulation in order to stay horizontal, then maybe it's like a gentle puzzle game like Botany Manor or The Last Campfire. Those are two moody, atmospheric games that I really enjoyed kind of being in, but that also included kind of like moving through and interacting with worlds that they had built as I solved puzzles in order to move forward. And both were popular enough that if I looked online or on Reddit threads, I could find guidance. So I didn't have to stay stuck, or I didn't have to have it turn hard and become like a nervous system elevated thing. And that might also be a key, like looking up the answer or the right next step when you are stumped. Like that is not cheating. It's keeping it cozy. It's keeping it restorative. That makes me think of the cheat codes for games as a kid, like the code that I used when I was playing The Sims. They gave me unlimited money. Like that money let me buy the big house and furnish it with all the cool furniture that I wanted. And that was my favorite part of the game. So why would I think that that's wrong? Like that allowed me to play the game in the way that felt good for me. And so all of this comes back to that laziness myth. Like, why would we hold ourselves back from what would actually make us feel better because we think it's lazy or cheating? Like, why don't we give ourselves what we recognize we actually need? So use the cheat code, look up the answer to the puzzle, lie down even when others can see you. That is the moral to the story of this episode. And yes, so like in every episode, take a moment. What is sparking for you? Take a moment to be present to something that's bubbling up to the surface that you kind of want to like lock in for yourself. And if you need reminders, you can check out the show notes at audhdsparks.com and share your sparks with me over on Instagram at audhdsparks. What is landing for me about this whole conversation? I think I just said it, like, let's give ourselves what we need when we recognize we need it, right? There's that first step of knowing, oh my gosh, I think I'm headed towards burnout. or oh my gosh, I'm in burnout. I need to get out of this. But then the next step is, what do I need? And then the step after that is like actually giving it to yourself. So rest is not lazy. Video games are not lazy. Binging on comfort shows is not lazy, because it might be exactly what you need. All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of AuDHD Sparks. We have got just one more episode after this one until our winter break, and it's a really good one that I've been excited to share with you, so I can't wait to share it. If this episode helped you, share it with another AuDHDer, and you can find out more about working with me over at adriasophia.com/AuDHD. All right, talk to you next week.